Hello, sorry about the band of bright light there. You try and keep the light out and it finds a way in, doesn't it? Right, with the Scottish Family Party, we've sometimes used the tagline, integrity, decency and truth. But unfortunately at the moment, well, not yet in any case, we don't live in Scottish Family Party land. We live in Scottish National Party land. So I just want to have a quick look at 3 stories from this week in SNP, Scotland. The first one, very sad story. This is a story of a sexual assault in a primary school in Edinburgh, in which a pupil aged 10 or 11 was apparently held down in the toilets and sexually assaulted by 2 pupils aged 11 or 12. I'm not sure whether this was a mixed-sex toilet, which of course is the policy in lots of councils. I'm not sure about that. It'll be interesting to see if that comes out in the future. But one thing we do know is that this sexual assault in a primary school took place immediately after a sex education lesson. I was surprised by that? Not entirely. Not entirely. Because statistics in general, the number of child-on-child sexual assaults is growing, but the style of sex education that is implemented in Scotland and Scottish schools in general is going to tend to lead to these sorts of problems. Right? Other problems with this, the parents of the victim were not informed initially. Now, I would imagine the school might have been thinking that the parents might be a bit unenlightened. Maybe they'd be a bit judgmental. They wouldn't quite understand the school's approach. I'm not sure, but they were not informed. And also, at least one of the perpetrators is now back in school, attending the school with the other pupils. Now, some parents, understandably, are outraged by the secrecy and also by the apparent lack of punishment as well. Now, the lack of punishment, again, this is just in line with Scottish government policy. I mean, probably the perpetrators would have sat down in an armchair for a restorative conversation. How do you feel about it now? How can we support you better? What led you to do this? Was there something that's bothering you? Now, you won't do it again, will you? Oh, no, no, no. I mean, that's the sort of conversation that one can assume has taken place if they're operating in line with the Scottish government's policy. Now, if this incident is as it seems, as has been reported in the press, then I would suggest the perpetrators should be expelled from the school because they need to learn the lesson. They need to learn the life lesson. If you sexually assault someone in that sort of violent manner, then that really is a major life incident. Life does not continue on as normal when you behave like that. They need to learn that lesson, and they can learn that lesson and move forward in a new school and hopefully not be involved in this sort of thing again. In terms of the school's ethos, the older pupils in particular in the school, they'll all know what's happened, and they should know that if someone behaves like that, then that's the end of them. That's just not acceptable in the school community or any other, so they're gone. They're not still there, they may be a bit cocky or whatever, they're not still there in the community. That's just wrong. They should be gone. And for the victim themselves as well, I don't think it's right that they should be encountering these characters in their life at school. They should feel that the school, the council, were so much on their side, they're absolutely on their side, took this extremely seriously. So the pupils who did it, well, they have been moved on to another school. Now, some people, of course, will say, well, this just shows we need more consent classes. There are lots of consent classes. The Scottish sex education curriculum is full of lessons about consent. They get more than enough of that. The problem is that the lessons at this stage are about basically how to have sex. If you teach children how to have sex, that tacitly normalizes having sex, because they assume you're being told at this age because this is something that you might want to do at this age. Now, quite often in Scottish schools, I think sex education is saved until the end of the summer term. We've had a lot of parents getting in touch with us, very concerned. I think they do it at the end of the summer term because parents who've got least attention on their education, they can do it and then send them off on holiday so it doesn't get followed up as much. So I think it's a way of just trying to avoid scrutiny of what goes on in sex education classes. But the other problem with this sort of sex education is it fires the imagination, let's say, particularly your boys. If you're having a lesson about, having sex feels really nice, this is what you do. And, inevitably, with boys, 11, 12 years old, some of them are going to start thinking along those lines, how do I get to do this? I wonder what it's like. And, well, that can lead to incidents such as this. Another factor as well in the background, no doubt, is the lack of discipline in schools as well. where self-control is not really required of pupils. Pupils can have the most outrageous outbursts and misbehave in various ways, but generally there's virtually no punishment. It's just a little friendly chat. So the schools are basically indulgent of bad behaviour. So you have pupils growing up, boys in particular I would say, who are sort of out of control and they're not used to having to restrain their urges. If they want to do something, they do it, and then you sort of get away with it, so it's fine. So they're in the habit of being unrestrained in their behaviour, and that may well have been a factor in this case as well. Right, moving on, the second out of my three out of the stories. This is North Lanarkshire Council, the new council leader just elected last month, SNP. Here he is with the pride flag, with pupils from local schools and a drag queen. Now the pride flag, let's be crystal clear what the pride flag means. The pride flag means pride in celebration of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and usually it's taken to be transgender identities as well. Now that is in direct conflict, direct contradiction with, for example, the teachings of the Catholic Church, what evangelical Christians believe, what most Muslims believe, what people from lots of religions around the world, lots of people with no religion, who believe that homosexual relationships are either immoral or not ideal or whatever, but they don't feel there's something to be proud of. Similarly with transgender identities, a lot of people feel that it's, for example, a mental health issue to be treated with sympathy but not to be celebrated. So the pride flag directly contradicts the values and views of a very large section of the Scottish public. Now, just to emphasise the transgender element, we've got the drag queen there. Drag queens, obviously, in general, perform sexualised, quite smutty shows, but having the man dressed as a woman, that's encouraging transvestitism, cross-dressing, call it what you will, and it's promoting gender confusion. It's saying, if you're a boy and you fancy dressing up as a girl, as a woman, then we're going to be right behind you. We think that's fantastic. Similarly, if you're a girl, if you fancy, acting, dressing, being a boy, then we're right behind you. We think that's absolutely wonderful. This is a role model for you. This drag queen is a role model. And that's just so irresponsible. It's so irresponsible. It's going to lead to all sorts of problems for pupils in the future. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal. I am bothered about that. I want to protect children from the damage that has been done to them by this sort of messaging in schools. You notice in the picture there are more girls than boys. When you see these sort of things, there are virtually always far more girls than boys. I think generally in school, girls tend to be a bit more eager to please, so perhaps they're more susceptible to indoctrination. I don't know. That seems to be the way it works out in any case. Now, when I saw that picture, my first feeling was maybe sort of fatigue, where I thought, okay, yeah, it's completely wrong, but is it news? I mean, it's just par for the course. It's just routine. This is Scottish government policy. This is the council leader. This is just normal. But we mustn't think that. We mustn't think that. It's wrong. This is indoctrination. It's going to cause pain in families, and it's going to result in kids basically being messed up and their path into the future blighted with all sorts of problems. So we can't just say, oh, well, it's the world we live in now. That's what happens. We just have to accept it. No, it's wrong, and it needs to stop. Right, the last story. This is about Patrick Grady, SNP MP. Found to have made unwanted sexual advances towards a teenager. The former chief whip was accused of touching and stroking the neck hair and back of a 19-year-old male party worker in a London pub. A Westminster probe concluded earlier this week that he had significantly breached Parliament's sexual misconduct policy. Significantly breached the sexual misconduct policy. That sounds quite a serious issue to me. But then what's emerged as a secret recording that was made of Ian Blackford, the SNP leader at Westminster, speaking to his group of MPs. And Ian Blackford said, Patrick Grady, is going to face a number of challenges over the short term, so he should have our absolute full support. And the recording showed other MPs, SNP MPs there saying, oh yeah, absolutely, we're right behind him, give him a clap, that's great. We're absolutely supportive of him. Then the way Ian Blackford dealt with this was that he got Patrick Grady in his office, then invited the victim along, and then Patrick Grady apologised to the victim, and then Ian Blackford said to the victim, basically, do you accept the apology? To bring someone into a meeting with people far more senior than himself, and just to be presented with this situation where you're expected, the pressure is on to accept the apology, is obviously not the right way to deal with it. Anyway, a spokesman for the SNP Westminster Group said, "Staff and MPs have been offered pastoral support throughout this process. The group has a duty to ensure the personal welfare of all involved, including the impact on mental health and well-being." What do you think of that? I mean, what has that remotely got to do with the allegations here, with what's going on here? I mean, if the police dug up a dead body in Ian Blackford's back garden and the SNP issued a statement, it would be something like this: "All gardening policies and procedures have been properly followed. Steps are now being taken in consultation with Environmental Protection Scotland to restore the lawn to its original condition." In other words, cut and paste niceties that are just completely unrelated to the actual issue at the heart of it. Now, let's imagine that Patrick Grady had made unwanted sexual advances to a woman. How would they have responded to that? How would Nicola Sturgeon have responded? Nicola Sturgeon, who said Alex Salmond is unfit for public office. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with her there. But how come he's rendered unfit? But then this case here, they'll just smooth it over and he carries on as if nothing's happened. Remember Mark MacDonald, SNP, MSP? He sent a sort of sexual joke to someone by text when he was asking her out in the Parliament. I mean, the joke, I wouldn't dream of sending something like that, but at the end of it, it was fairly mild. He ended up for the chop, basically, by the SNP. The fact that he was married with a family when he was making these advances to another woman, the SNP didn't care about that, obviously. But the fact that he had this dodgy joke in meant it was the end of the line for him, and he lost his job. I mean, the double standard is pretty stark. To actually be making these physical advances is far more serious than a sort of dodgy joke gone a bit wrong. But the double standard is, well, it seems that once an LGBT element comes into things, a whole different set of moral standards seem to apply. And also here, we're dealing with a male victim. Whereas before, with Mark MacDonald, it was a female victim, so we had the book thrown at him. Sheer hypocrisy. Simple as that. Anyways, that's a quick update from SNP land. And what we're talking about here, these are moral failings: corrupting sex education, indoctrination into a dangerous ideology, and sheer hypocrisy. And the problem with moral failings is not just this, I don't like them, or they go against what I believe. They result in people getting hurt. So back to the Scottish Family Party. Integrity, decency and truth. We feel that they are sorely needed qualities in Scottish politics at the moment. And if you want to support us in our quest to bring them into the Scottish Parliament, do join the Scottish Family Party right now or become a regular donor via the link below. Thanks.